The first sound was not the call of birds, nor the rustle of grass, it was a cry. Thin, wavering, and out of place in the golden hush of dawn. Mara stopped walking, her breath caught mid-motion. The savannah stretched before her like an ocean of light, endless and calm, yet beneath that calm something was breaking. The cry came again, soft, desperate, fading almost before it reached her. She turned toward it, stepping carefully through the tall grass. Every sound felt amplified, the hum of insects, the whisper of wind, the dry crackle of seed pods beneath her boots. The light was growing stronger now, washing the horizon in amber. But the cry, it came from somewhere close, beneath the shade of a low acacia. There, half hidden by roots and dust, lay a lion cub. It was no bigger than a house cat, its fur pale gold and clumped with dirt. One paw twitched faintly as it tried to lift its head, but the effort was too much. The cub's eyes fluttered, open, closed, open again. Around its ribs, the skin was tight. A thin line of blood crusted near its flank, where an old wound had begun to fester. The smell of infection mixed with the dry heat of the morning. Mara crouched down, her shadow falling over the tiny body. She didn't move for a long while, only watched. The cub's breathing was shallow, but steady. No movement came from the grasslands around. No other lions. No mother's call. Her voice came as little more than breath. "Easy, little one." The cub twitched at the sound but didn't retreat. Its eyes met hers for a flicker of a moment, a dull amber gaze clouded with exhaustion. Then, it lowered its head again, its strength spent. Mara took her canteen and tore a strip from the scarf around her neck. She poured a few drops of water onto the cloth and began cleaning the wound. The cub flinched once, a small sound escaping its throat, not quite a growl, not quite a cry. She paused, whispering, "It's all right. I won't hurt you." The wind stirred the branches above. The acacia leaves trembled, casting speckled light over them both. Slowly, she continued, dabbing the wound until the crust loosened and the dirt washed away. Beneath, the skin was red but not deep, a cut from a fall or perhaps a thorn, worsened by infection. She reached for the small pouch at her belt, found antiseptic cream, and rubbed a thin layer along the wound. When she looked up, the cub was watching her again. Its chest rose and fell a little faster now. "Good," she murmured. "You're strong." Minutes passed in silence. The savannah resumed its rhythm, the distant calls of hornbills, the sighing grass. A few flies circled but didn't land. Mara sat still, her knees pressed to the earth, her hand resting lightly near the cub's paw. Then, something changed. The cub stretched one paw forward, pressing it into the dust, testing the ground. It lifted its head, only an inch, but held it there. The sun caught its fur, turning it into a shimmer of light. Mara smiled softly. "That's it." For the first time, she saw not weakness but will, a small, instinctive push against the weight of the world. The cry that had drawn her here faded into the hum of the plains. Above them, the sky opened wide and clear. The cub's breathing slowed, deepened. Its eyes, still heavy, closed. It wasn't surrender, it was trust. Mara sat beside it until the sun climbed high, until the shade beneath the acacia shifted and the air began to warm. The land was silent again, but the silence felt different now, full, alive. Somewhere in that quiet, a bond had formed. Fragile. Wordless. Real. The cub woke to the scent of milk and smoke. Morning sunlight rippled through the thorn branches, casting thin shadows across the small clearing. Mara sat nearby, her back against the acacia, a tin cup in her hands. Inside it, warm milk mixed with powder swirled slowly. She tested its temperature against her wrist, then reached for the small bottle she'd fashioned the night before. The cub stirred, blinking in confusion. His belly rumbled softly. For a long moment, he only watched her, a creature so different from anything he had known. His fur was cleaner now, the wound dressed with a soft cloth bound around his ribs. The swelling had eased, though his steps were still unsteady. "Come on," Mara whispered. Her voice was low, steady, the same rhythm she had used when calming injured birds back at the reserve. "It's just milk. You need it." The cub hesitated, his small body tense. Instinct told him to retreat, but hunger drew him forward. He sniffed the air, then the bottle, his tiny nose brushing against the rubber tip. One tentative lick. Then another. Soon, the sound of quiet sucking filled the air. Mara exhaled slowly, relief softening her features. The cub drank greedily now, his paws pressing against her wrist, claws barely grazing her skin. Drops of milk glistened on his whiskers. When the bottle emptied, he licked the rim until there was nothing left. "Good boy," she murmured. "Good, little one." The days that followed passed in quiet rhythm, the kind of stillness that only the wild could hold. Every dawn began the same, the crackle of the fire, the cry of faraway birds, the cub's faint rustling as he woke. Mara named him Tano, for the 5 days that had passed since she'd found him. The name seemed to fit him, small but determined, a survivor against the silence. His wound healed slowly, leaving behind a pale scar like a brushstroke along his ribs. He began to follow her around the camp, his steps uneven but brave. Sometimes, he stumbled over roots or tufts of grass, landing in a puff of dust. He would blink, shake himself off, and try again. Each fall was met with the same quiet patience from Mara. She never rushed him, never pushed. The cub learned by instinct, and she learned to let the wild teach him. At dusk, he curled beside her boots, his small body a warm pulse against the cooling earth. His breathing steadied in sleep, and sometimes he twitched, paws kicking at unseen shapes in dreams. Out beyond the camp, the savannah came alive in layers of sound, frogs croaking from a distant pool, hyenas calling to the night, and, far away, the deep, rolling roar of lions. Every time the roar echoed, Tano lifted his head. His ears pricked, his tail flicked once. Then he would answer, a soft, high-pitched cry, uncertain but instinctive. The first time he did it, Mara froze. The sound was both beautiful and heartbreaking, the call of a child reaching for a world he could still remember. He would keep calling until the echoes faded. Then he'd lower his head again, eyes heavy with confusion and longing. Mara watched him quietly. She knew she was only a bridge between two worlds, the human and the wild. Her job was not to keep him, but to return him to where he belonged. Not long now, she whispered one night as he slept. We'll find them. The wind rustled through the dry grass, carrying the scent of rain from somewhere far off. Overhead, the sky stretched open, scattered with stars. Their light flickered across the cub's fur, turning it almost golden again. Mara reached out, her hand hovering just above his back, not to touch, only to feel the warmth radiating from his small frame. He was healing, growing, remembering who he was. In the silence, a fragile bond had formed, not one of ownership, but of understanding. Two lives, briefly crossing paths in a land that belonged to neither, but accepted both. The wind carried a dry heat across the plains that morning, restless, filled with dust. Mara folded her tent, moving with practiced calm. Near the acacia's shade, the cub waited, golden eyes following her every motion. He was stronger now, steadier on his paws. 4 days, distant roars had haunted the night, soft, haunting calls that stirred something deep in him. It was time to follow. Mara slung her canteen over her shoulder, her voice barely above the wind. Let's go find your family. They moved together across the open land, the sun climbing behind them. The path followed an old riverbed, dry, cracked, and silent. Bones of antelope lay scattered like memories along the way. The air shimmered with heat, and insects buzzed around her boots. Tano trotted beside her, pausing often to sniff the ground. His gait carried new strength, the wild returning to him piece by piece. Now and then, he glanced up at her, as if to make sure she was still there. By midday, the heat pressed hard. Mara crouched under a stunted tree, uncapped her flask, and poured a little water into her palm. The cub lapped it eagerly, his rough tongue scraping her skin. She smiled faintly. Good boy. The land stretched wide and pale around them, endless grass, stones, and wind. Yet there were signs, faint paw prints etched into sand, the drag marks of a carcass, and the distant echo of vultures circling high above. Mara felt her heart steady, the pride was moving north, maybe not far ahead. They walked again, step by careful step. As the ridge rose before them, shadows lengthened. The scent in the air changed, sharp, animal, familiar. Tano stopped, nose to the ground, tail flicking once. He knew. Mara climbed the ridge, her boots scraping against stone. At the top, she froze. Below, the carcass of a wildebeest lay torn open, half-eaten. Around it, wide paw prints, pressed fresh into the dust. She knelt, touching one with her fingertips. Lioness, she whispered. And young ones. Tano's ears pricked forward. A low sound rumbled from his chest, a growl too soft to threaten, too deep to be fear. His body trembled as he inhaled the scent. The wind lifted, carrying the smell of lions across the ridge, warm and unmistakable. Then came the roar. It rolled through the plains like thunder, deep and commanding. Tano froze, eyes wide, every muscle alive. He gave a small, answering cry, high-pitched but filled with something ancient. The echo drifted, caught by the breeze. Another roar answered. Then another, closer this time. The sound surrounded them, wild, fierce, alive. Mara's chest tightened as she watched the cub's trembling form. He stepped forward, his head high, and called again. The land went still after that. The insects quieted. Even the wind paused, as if listening. The air itself seemed to wait. Mara knelt beside him, whispering, "They hear you, little one." The cub's gaze stayed fixed on the far horizon. His tail twitched once, then stilled. A soft rumble rose from deep within him, not fear, but recognition. The sun dipped low, painting the grass with gold. Mara built a small fire and sat beside it, eyes on the darkening plains. Somewhere out there, beyond the shadows and the wind, the pride was waiting. That night, she didn't sleep. The wild had spoken. The path to his family was finally clear. The morning broke heavy with silence. The horizon glowed in a pale band of light, and the air hung thick with the scent of dust and grass. Mara walked slowly along the ridge, her boots brushing against dry roots. Tano followed, his movements cautious now, alert to every whisper of the wind. Something in him had changed overnight. He moved with a sense of purpose, drawn by a sound older than memory. They crossed the last stretch of open plain before noon. Ahead, the land folded into a shallow valley dotted with thorn trees. It was there Mara saw them, 5 lions standing among the grass, their coats gleaming gold beneath the rising sun. Her steps faltered. The lead lioness lifted her head, powerful shoulders rippling as she turned. Her eyes locked on the woman and the cub beside her. Behind her, 2 subadults shifted nervously, tails twitching. A low growl rolled through the air, deep and steady. Tano froze. Every muscle in his small body tensed. His ears pressed back, but his gaze didn't waver. He took 1 step forward. Mara whispered, "Easy now." The lioness took a few strides toward them, deliberate and measured. The others followed, spreading in a slow semicircle. Mara stood still, her heart pounding, but her body calm. She knew what she was seeing, a test of presence, a judgment older than fear. Tano looked up at her once, then turned back toward the pride. His tail flicked once, twice. Then he moved, 1 hesitant step, then another. The lioness stopped. Her nostrils flared as she caught his scent. For a breathless moment, the world held still. Then she made a sound, a low, questioning rumble, half growl, half call. Tano answered, his voice small but certain. Something shifted. The lioness lowered her head, sniffing the air. She took another step closer, the space between them shrinking to mere meters. Her muscles were relaxed now, her eyes softer, filled with recognition that no human could name. Tano whimpered once and pressed his body low, tail curling beneath him. Then, with a trembling step, he closed the distance. Mara's breath caught. The lioness leaned down, her massive head lowering until her muzzle brushed his ear. She gave 1 slow lick, deliberate, gentle, final. The cub responded with a faint cry, nuzzling her chest as if remembering something buried deep in instinct. The sound that followed was almost a sigh, the kind of quiet that only comes when something lost is found again. The other lions approached, circling them both. They sniffed him, prodded him, one even nudged him with a paw. No rejection. No hostility. Only acknowledgement. Within moments, Tano was swallowed by the pride, his small golden form blending seamlessly among their bodies. Mara exhaled the breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her hands trembled slightly, but her face remained composed. She took a slow step back, watching as the lioness turned her gaze toward her one final time. There was no aggression in that look, only calm recognition. A silent understanding. Mara whispered, almost inaudibly, "He's yours now." The lioness blinked once, as if in answer, then turned away. The pride began to move, first one, then all, their tails swaying in quiet rhythm as they melted into the tall grass. The cub trotted among them, occasionally glancing back toward the woman who had once been his world. Mara stood motionless as the last glint of his golden fur disappeared beyond the trees. The wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of purring growls and low rumbles fading into the distance. Then, silence. The savannah returned to its stillness, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It carried warmth now, the hum of life continuing, the echo of something profoundly right. Mara closed her eyes, the corners of her lips barely lifting. In that fragile balance between loss and fulfillment, she felt the truth of the wild, that everything, eventually, finds its way home. For a long time after the pride disappeared, Mara stood alone. The savannah had gone still again, quiet, almost listening. The wind moved softly through the grass, carrying the faint warmth of day fading into dusk. She turned slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settle deep inside her. Her jeep waited by the acacia line. The air shimmered faintly with heat, the sky painted in bands of pale orange and soft violet. She walked back in silence, each step slow, her boots pressing faint tracks into the dust. Halfway there, she stopped. A faint cry, low, uncertain, drifted across the wind. She turned sharply, scanning the tall grass. The sound came again, closer this time. Then she saw him. Tano! The cub trotted through the grass, fur golden against the light. He carried something in his mouth, a torn piece of fabric. Her scarf. When he reached her, he dropped it at her boots, panting softly. His eyes were wide, bright with a kind of innocence that made the air feel fragile. Mara knelt, whispering, "Hey, little one." He pressed his small head against her knee. For a few seconds, the world held still, just the sound of breathing and the gentle rustle of grass. Then, slowly, Tano turned back toward the horizon, where the pride had gone. He looked at her, then at the distance, torn between memory and instinct. A movement appeared far beyond him, a familiar golden shape. The lioness. She walked steadily toward them, powerful and sure. Her head was low, eyes fixed on the cub. Behind her, the pride gathered once more, their shapes blending into the fading light. Tano hesitated. His tail flicked once. Mara whispered, "Go." He obeyed. The cub bounded forward, small paws scattering dust. The lioness waited until he neared, then lowered her head and brushed her muzzle gently over his back. The gesture was quiet, yet full of recognition. The rest of the pride closed in, surrounding him with a circle of warmth and fur. Within moments, he was part of them again, a heartbeat among heartbeats, swallowed by the golden sea of family. Mara didn't move. She only watched. The lioness turned her gaze toward her one final time. Their eyes met, no fear, no threat, only quiet understanding. Then the lioness turned, leading her family away. The cub glanced back once, a flicker of gold in the dimming light. Then he followed. The sky deepened to rose and indigo. Dust hung in the air like smoke, glowing in the last light of day. The shapes of the lions grew smaller, dissolving into the horizon. Mara stood for a while longer. The wind carried their faint growls and purrs until even that was gone. The silence that followed was not empty, it was whole, complete. She reached down, picking up the torn scarf Tano had carried. It smelled faintly of grass and sun-warmed fur. Folding it gently, she placed it inside her jacket pocket. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice barely carried. But the wind lifted it, sending it across the plains, a soft echo to the life she had helped return to the wild. When she finally turned back, the first stars had appeared. The savanna pulsed with quiet life again, insects singing, a night bird calling far off. As Mara started the jeep, she looked once more toward the horizon. For just a second, two small golden reflections caught the light, eyes watching from the grass. Then they were gone. The wild was whole again. And though she drove away, the moment stayed, a memory that would live quietly between her heart and the horizon forever.